For most of the first half of the 20th century, if an American family wanted to buy practically anything, from a sewing machine to a full set of kitchen cabinets, the chances were better than even that they ordered it from a single company headquartered in Chicago. Montgomery Ward was not just a store. It was the way rural America accessed the modern world. At its peak, Ward's catalog reached tens of millions of homes. It was named alongside Webster's dictionary as one of the 100 books that shaped American life. The company invented the satisfaction guarantee. It created Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And for 3 decades, it was the largest mail-order retailer on earth, bigger than Sears, bigger than anyone. But fast forward to the year 2000 and Ward's is gone. Every single store shuttered. 37,315 jobs eliminated overnight. 128 years of American retail history erased with a single announcement 4 days after Christmas. Now, there is a simple villain in this story. His name is Sewell Avery, and the photograph of what happened to him in 1944 is one of the most extraordinary images of the 20th century. But the truth is more complicated and more damning. Because Avery did not just destroy Montgomery Ward, he proved that a man can be brilliant enough to save a company and stubborn enough to kill it, and that both things can be the same trait. What follows is one of the most remarkable stories of corporate self-destruction in American history. To understand what was lost, is you need to understand what Montgomery Ward actually was to the people who depended on it. Aaron Montgomery Ward was a traveling dry goods salesman who spent years watching rural farmers get cheated by local merchants who charged whatever they pleased because there was no competition. On August 18, 1872, Ward launched a radical idea, a single sheet of paper listing 163 items at fixed prices, shipped directly to customers by mail from Chicago. No middleman, no markups, just a catalog and a promise. That one-page price list became the world's first general merchandise mail order catalog. By 1904, the company was mailing 3 million catalogs a year, each one weighing 4 pounds. For millions of Americans, especially in the rural South and the Midwest, the Ward's catalog was a lifeline. It was how you got shoes for your children, tools for your farm, furniture for your home. For African American families under Jim Crow, who could not shop freely in local stores, it was one of the few places where the color of your skin did not determine what you could buy. The catalog did not ask who you were, it just shipped the order. Ward opened its first physical store in 1926. By 1929, the company ran 531 stores and earned $13 million in profit. Then the Depression hit. Losses ballooned to nearly $9 million. The company was hemorrhaging cash. JP Morgan and Company, which held the majority stake, needed someone who could stop the bleeding. They found Sewell Avery. And for a brief, brilliant moment, he was exactly the right man. But the man who saves something is not always the man who should keep running it. And that failure of understanding is about to cost America one of its greatest companies. If you're finding this story as remarkable as I am, hit subscribe. There is a lot more American business history on this channel that I think you will want to see. Sewell Lee Avery was born on November 4, 1874, in Saginaw, Michigan, into a wealthy lumber family. He earned a law degree from the University of Michigan in 1894, but never practiced a single day. Instead, he went into the gypsum business and rose to run the United States Gypsum Company by the time he was roughly 31 years old. His signature move came in September 1929. Sensing catastrophe, he laid off 2,000 employees, nearly half the payroll, and squirreled away $35 million in cash. Weeks later, the stock market crashed. US Gypsum never missed a single dividend during the entire Great Depression. The business world called him the Trouble Doctor. JP Morgan recruited Avery to take over Montgomery Ward in 1931. His turnaround was swift and ruthless. He closed 147 underperforming stores, slashed costs, and replaced the old catalog managers with chain store veterans. "We no longer depend on hicks and yokels," he told the press. "We sell more than overalls and manure-proof shoes." By 1936, Ward's profits topped $20 million. Fortune magazine named Avery the #1 Chicago businessman. Ward's sales climbed to 76% of Sears's. The gap looked closable. Avery was a genius. Everyone said so. But here is something I find genuinely shocking the deeper I dig into this story. The same quality that made Avery brilliant in the Depression, his absolute conviction that he knew what was coming, is the exact quality that would destroy everything he built. Because Avery had lived through the brutal recession of 1920 to 1921, when prices crashed nearly 37% after World War I. He had correctly predicted the Great Depression. And now, with World War II ending, he was certain history would repeat itself. A serious depression has followed every major war except World War II, he told reporters, dragging out his charts. When the boom kept going month after month, year after year, his only response was, "Somebody is holding this thing up." His strategy was simple: hoard cash, wait for the crash. When prices collapsed, Wards would swoop in, buy everything at fire sale prices, and crush the overextended competition. It was a reasonable fear backed by historical precedent, but it was wrong, and Avery refused to change his mind for a decade. Now, to understand what that stubbornness actually cost, you need to know what happened at the company Avery had already wounded before he ever arrived. In 1924, Montgomery Ward fired a vice president named Robert E. Wood. Wood was a former Army brigadier general who had managed logistics for 50,000 workers on the Panama Canal. He kept insisting Ward should open retail stores, and management did not want to hear it. So they let him go. Wood walked straight across Chicago to Sears. Hans became its president in 1928 and built the retail empire that would bury Montgomery Ward. That single personnel decision may be the most catastrophic firing in American retail history, and it happened 9 years before Avery even took over. But what Avery did next made it irreversible. After World War II, General Wood at Sears studied the census data, the automobile registrations, the GI Bill, the pent-up consumer demand. He saw what was coming, an immense suburban boom, so he bet the company. Sears invested $35 million immediately, opening hundreds of stores on cheap suburban land with free parking lots before the suburbs were even built. One California Sears store famously opened with cows still roaming in the parking lot. Meanwhile, Sewell Avery sat in his office in Chicago with $293 million in cash and government securities and did nothing. From roughly 1941 to 1957, Montgomery Ward did not open a single new store. Not one. 16 years. During the greatest retail expansion in American history, the company that invented American retail sat frozen. Sears opened over 100 new stores in prime suburban locations and relocated more than 200 existing stores to larger facilities, reaching over 700 stores by 1954. Ward's sat with roughly 600 stores in smaller, declining locations, watching the suburbs fill up around them. If you are finding this story as compelling as I am, drop a comment below. I would genuinely like to know if you or your family ever shopped at Montgomery Ward. Avery would not even approve spending money to paint the existing stores, which grew shabby and outdated, while Sears gleamed in the new suburbs. He refused employee pension plans, profit sharing, and insurance, benefits Sears offered generously, and anyone who disagreed with him paid for it immediately. During his 24-year tenure, Avery cycled through 4 presidents and roughly 40 vice presidents. The departed executives formed a group they called the Has-Been Club. "If anybody ventures to differ with me, I throw them out the window," Avery told associates, and he meant it nearly literally. Time magazine described him as like an oriental potentate who has beheaded all of his viziers, sitting in lonely splendor in his paneled throne room. By 1949, all 8 vice president positions at Montgomery Ward sat completely empty. Outsiders shunned the openings. "Not me," they said. "Not there." But the most dramatic confrontation of Avery's career did not happen in a boardroom. It happened during the war itself, and it produced one of the most famous photographs in American business history. Montgomery Ward's warehouse workers in Chicago, roughly 7,000 of them, had won a union representation election. The National War Labor Board ordered Avery to recognize the union and sign a collective bargaining agreement. Avery refused. He called unions subversive conspiracies. When the contract expired on April 12, 1944, the workers struck. On April 25th, President Roosevelt signed an executive order directing the government to seize Montgomery Ward's Chicago operations under wartime authority. The next day, soldiers arrived, but Avery went to work the following morning as if nothing had happened. On April 27, 1944, Attorney General Francis Biddle flew to Chicago and walked into Avery's office and ordered him to leave. Avery refused to move from his chair. He shouted to hell with the government. Then, turning to Biddle as a final insult, he snarled, "You New Dealer!" Biddle ordered the soldiers to remove him. 2 Army National Guard troops, Sergeant Jacob Leapak of Milwaukee and Private Cecil Dyes of Nashville, physically lifted the 70-year-old Avery from his chair and carried him out of the building, arms crossed in defiance, on through the front door and down the street to his waiting car. An Associated Press photographer captured the moment. The photograph ran on front pages across America and became one of the most iconic images of the home front during World War II. The next day, Avery quipped, "I have been fired before in my life, but this is the first time they carried me out feet first." The government ran Ward's operations for about 2 weeks before returning them. But Avery was not finished. He refused to comply again. On December 27, 1944, Roosevelt signed a second executive order, this time seizing Montgomery Ward operations across 9 cities. The Army occupied Ward's facilities for nearly 10 months. Secretary of War Henry Stimson had begged Roosevelt not to involve the military. Every man was needed in the war effort. Stimson argued, "It is a great army, Mr. President. It must not be sent to act as clerks to sell women's panties over the counter of a store. But here is the part that still gets me. That defiant photograph, that image of Avery being carried out with his arms folded, made him a conservative folk hero. A Gallup poll showed 60% of Americans thought the government seizure was a mistake. Avery became a symbol of resistance against overreach. And that public adoration made him untouchable inside his own company for another decade, the precise decade when every single decision he made was wrong. The numbers tell the story of catastrophic divergence. In 1937, Ward's sales stood at 76% of Sears's. Competitive distance. By 1944, they had slipped to 62%. By 1951, Sears had more than double Ward's volume. By 1954, Sears generated $3 billion in sales towards $1 billion, a 3-to-1 gap that kept widening. During the first 8 post-war years, Sears's profits rose 229%. Ward's crawled upward just 21%. J.C. Penney passed Ward's for second place. The company that invented American mail-order retail had fallen to a distant third. By the mid-1950s, Ward's stagnation made it a target. The company's stock traded at $56 per share, despite net assets of $88 per share. A self-made Jacksonville millionaire named Lewis Wolfson, who had boxed professionally as Kid Wolf in his teens, announced he had acquired over 105,000 shares and called Ward's a glaring and notorious example of private enterprise in reverse gear. Avery, then 81 years old, summoned reporters for his first press conference in years. Flanked by busts of Washington and Lincoln, he called Wolfson's challenge a very savage and vicious thing and a menace to the United States. When asked about the cash hoard, he smiled and said, "Do you know anyone who has $600 million all wrapped up in a bundle?" The proxy fight went to a shareholder vote on April 22, 1955. Avery technically won majority control, but within 3 weeks, his own allies turned on him. 5 outside directors decided he had to go. His doctor and his 2 daughters begged him to resign. On May 9, 1955, Sewell Avery signed his resignation. The New York Stock Exchange suspended trading in Ward stock for nearly an hour as buying orders flooded in. The stock jumped 4.5 points in a single day. Wall Street was celebrating the departure of the man who had been handed America's greatest retail company and chosen to let it die. Avery retreated to his Evanston home. He died on October 31st, 1960, of a cerebral hemorrhage. From his hospital bed, he reportedly drew quiet satisfaction from the fact that Ward's new management had been forced to halve the quarterly dividend after spending aggressively on expansion. Even dying, he believed he had been right all along. If you are finding value in this story and want to see more like it, hit subscribe. There is a lot more where this came from. Avery's successor moved quickly. Salaries went up, a pension plan was introduced. The first new Montgomery Ward store since the 1930s opened in 1957. 30 new stores followed by 1960. But the damage was permanent. The prime suburban locations were taken. Sears owned them. And 3 new competitors, Kmart, Walmart, and Target, all launched in 1962, carving up what was left. The company cycled through owners and strategies with increasing desperation. In 1968, it merged to form Marcor Incorporated. In 1974, oil giant Mobil Corporation bought it for roughly $1 billion. Under Mobil, Ward lost $233 million in 1980 and another $217 million in 1981. Mobil pumped over $600 million into Ward's to cover losses. In 1985, the new management killed the catalogue after 113 years and restructured the stores. In 1988, a management-led leveraged buyout valued the company at $3.8 billion, backed by GE Capital. Record profits of $153 million followed in 1990. But competition from Best Buy, Home Depot, and Walmart shredded the margins. By 1996, Ward lost $237 million. On July 7, 1997, Montgomery Ward filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy with roughly 400 stores and 60,000 employees. It emerged 2 years later, rebranded simply as Ward's, with 250 surviving stores. Used, but after a disastrous Christmas 2000 season, GE Capital pulled support. On December 28, 2000, Montgomery Ward announced it would cease all operations. 37,315 jobs gone. The largest retail liquidation in American history at that time. Employees received 1 week's severance per year of service, capped at 13 weeks. No extended health benefits. The pension plan covering 30,000 retirees and 22,000 active employees had already been terminated the year before. Customers at liquidation sales were described as vultures hovering over a carcass. A 40-year employee named Ollie Allen in Chicago said, "It has been a good company for me. I sent 3 kids to college." Another longtime worker said, "God, it gave me self-esteem. I was able to purchase my home." One employee, interviewed on public television, put it simply, "Someone had said there is life after Ward's. Yes, there is. But when you have been there a long time and it is your livelihood, it is just trying to get out there again and start all over. And if those numbers still do not make the scale of it land, try this one." By the late 1930s, Avery had Ward's within striking distance of Sears. The gap was closable. Everybody knew it. By the year 2000, Ward's was dead and Sears was still the largest retailer in America. 2 companies that could have gone toe-to-toe, separated by one man's decision to sit still while the world moved. But here is the detail that still surprises me. Among the things Montgomery Ward gave America before it died was something that had nothing to do with retail. In 1939, a Ward's advertising copywriter named Robert L. May, deeply in debt while his wife was dying of cancer, was assigned to write a children's story for the company's holiday giveaway. Inspired by his own outsider childhood and his daughter's love of deer at the Lincoln Park Zoo, May created Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Ward's distributed 2.4 million copies that first year. In an uncharacteristic act of generosity, Avery transferred the copyright to May in 1947. May's brother-in-law wrote the song. Gene Autry's recording sold 25 million copies. the 1964 television special remains the longest-running Christmas special in history. Montgomery Ward is gone, but the misfit reindeer it created endures. What finally ended in the year 2000 was not just a company. It was an unbroken chain stretching back to 1872. The supplier relationships, the distribution networks, the institutional knowledge built across 5 generations of American workers, all of it dissolved when the last store went dark. That is not something you rebuild. You can start a new company with the same name, and someone did. An online retailer now uses the Montgomery Ward brand. But that is not this. There is no line connecting a website to Aaron Montgomery Ward's one-page price list, or to the massive catalog warehouses on the Chicago River, or to the 37,000 people who lost their jobs 4 days after Christmas. Sewell Avery's story is not simply a tale of incompetence. He was genuinely brilliant. He saved 2 major companies from ruin. His 1929 foresight was uncanny. His error was more subtle and more human. He fought the last war. The same Depression-era instinct that made him a genius in the 1930s destroyed Montgomery Ward in the 1950s. He was right that depressions had followed every major war in American history. He was wrong that the pattern would hold after World War II. And his autocracy, his compulsive firing of anyone who disagreed, meant there was no mechanism to correct his error. He had the cash to compete with Sears at every turn. He simply chose not to. The question nobody ever properly answers is how a single man's refusal to look at new evidence and change course can be allowed to destroy something that took 128 years to build, and who pays for it when it does. If you want to see another story exactly like it, about how one man's stubbornness destroyed a different American empire, then this next video is made for you.